I'm standing in front of the Deitz cabin. There's great history on this cabin. It was built in 1820 by Pinckney Deitz. The family has donated a lot of history and genealogy to the family that lived here. It was located about 2 miles southwest of here on the Henry River. It was moved here in 1994. The interesting part of the whole village, yeah, each cabin has its own story. This cabin has several interesting stories. First, I had seen a picture of the chimney in the cabin probably 10 years earlier, probably in the 80s. And a guy I guess was going to try and bargain to sell it to me, and knew I was a doctor, and came to my office one day and offered it to me for $10,000. Well, I had never paid over probably $100, $200 for any of the cabins we'd moved over here, and I kind of laughed at him. Well, 10 years later, Richard Ryle, a neighboring friend of mine who does the pewter spoons here, asked me did I know of any log cabins, because he wanted to put a couple on his place. And I said, the only one I know of that I can remember was that particular cabin. Well, I told him where I thought it was, and I even drove him up and down the river and around all over that part of the county, and we couldn't find it. So I said, Richard, let's get in my airplane. I had a little 170. And we got in the airplane and we flew. I knew you could see the Henry River from the back porch. So we flew up and down tree level and up and down that river, and we could not find it. Well, not knowing, he later walked that river and found it and bought it for like $600 or $800. I mean, I was heartbroken at it because it was such a beautiful cabin with the beautiful stone chimneys. Well, he started taking it down, and then I don't know whether, I think he had a job there building furniture, and I think he just didn't have time to finish it, so he came and offered it to me for what he'd paid for it, basically. So we moved it, and we moved it in 1994. Some interesting stories about the cabin itself. Number one, to go outside, you have to go outside of the front porch. To go upstairs where you sleep, it has two doors, the outside door for upstairs and the inside door for downstairs. Well, Ken McCurry and me and Harold Starnes, the three of us, were taking it down. We'd gotten the top level all the way down to level to the second floor. Well, we take the stairs out intact, and there's two 4x4s that hold the stairs up, not realizing there was a log that went from the stairs to the back log in the back. And when I knocked those 4x4s out, the weight of the steps collapsed, and it pushed that back log out. The entire building came down, and the only thing that actually saved my life, I was standing with a stairwell. The whole building came down. Harold had just walked out. He wouldn't be around today. He had just walked out with some paneling boards, and poor Ken McCurry, it had taken him out, and he fell in a root cellar. Now, like I said, I was lucky. I stood there with the whole building at my feet. Even the flooring and the rafters was sitting there at my feet. A cloud of dust for a good 4 or 5 minutes. Ken was in the bottom, he fell in a root cellar, was in the bottom hollering and screaming. Of course, 20 minutes before we could dig the logs off of him with the tractor and get him out. Made a couple house calls while he was hurting, just bruised him up, nothing major. And about 3 weeks later, he came up and said, Bob, he said, here's a bill for $85. I said, for what? He said, you see right here? Said, one of those logs caught me right in the mouth, and that's what the dentist charged me to redo this plate. I said, no problem, you're covered. I gave him the $85. He never came back to help me tear down a cabin. He did volunteer to do the Brunswick stew that we used to do down at the bottom of the hill behind us. The two chimneys that you see attached to this kitchen in the front part of the cabin, notice the small rock. It took me almost 2 months, almost the whole summer, to complete these two chimneys. We're now entering the Deitz House. As you come into this cabin, as in all cabins, you'll see a handout on the wall that tells the history of the cabin, the families that live there, and other history that we could find through court records. Also, in most cabins, is a small photo album showing you what the cabin looked like when we find it, tearing it down and putting it back together. In this particular cabin, there's an early family portrait of the Deitz family on the left as you come in. When you come into the room, you'll notice there's a nice dining room table, which is fully set for 6 people. We have blue feather-tipped china that looks like it's ready for the family to come in for a meal. One of the most impressive corner cupboards in the entire village is in the right corner. It's 16 pane walnut, made in Catawba County. There are 3 known cupboards identical to this particular cupboard. The maker is unknown. The one identical to the cupboard here is featured in the museum in Newton. I first saw it and thought my wife had lent it to the museum. Interestingly enough, It takes several extra inches to stand up a corner cupboard, and the height was too tall for this particular room. If you notice carefully, I took a chainsaw and cut out a little notch in the above rafter. On the mantel on top of the fireplace, you'll see a figure 8 clock and a painting by Minnie Reinhardt, a patient of mine and well-known folk artist. Her daughter and now granddaughter are still painting in the same tradition. She lived only a few miles from here. By the back chimney window in the corner is really an unusual piece. It's late 1700s swinging cradle. At the festival, it's usually placed outside on chains and often has an actual infant in it. By the cradle, you see a number of early ironing boards that are different lengths based on what type of cloth or clothing you had to iron. Notice it can be placed flat on a table with the different sizes to accommodate the different things you had to iron. Probably one of my favorite pie safes in this cabin, made of heart pine, found in South Carolina. It has beautifully decorated urns in the tins. Another favorite piece in this cabin is the early wooden wagon wheel tricycle that dates to the late 1800s. I can just see the child riding down the dirt road, kicking up a cloud of dust behind him, seeing how fast he could go. Moving into the room on the left, the parlor, you'll see a collection of early instrument-making tools and an early chest. This was made for a violin maker or someone that repaired violins, and I found this in Tennessee. Notice all the little handmade vices, scribes, bottles of dyes and solvents, and small-sized sanding block. This particular one is put together with handmade nails. This chest was owned by V.C. Andrews from Tennessee. He was a master violin maker in the mid-1800s. In the bottom of the chest, I found newspapers that dated to the Civil War times. The bookcase beside the violin maker's desk has some nice hand-carved folk art and a good example of an old violin in the 1800s housed in a wooden case. By the side door is an early wardrobe and a wagon wheel stroller. Just past the door is an early settled table, sometimes called a bench table, because you could fold up the tabletop, push it further against the wall, and use the seat as a bench. Over in the far corner is another corner cupboard, and as you know, corner cupboards are a weakness of mine. It's nicely filled with some wood carvings and some Catawba Valley pottery. To complete this room, you'll find 2 more tables with lamps. Now, if you wanted to enter the bedroom, you have to go all the way outside, in the wintertime even, go up the steps to the second floor. As you go up the steps on the left, notice a nice big large Catawba Valley pot, probably some 15 to 20 gallons, that we use to put umbrellas, walking sticks, or anything else in. In the bedroom on the right, you see a child's crib, which could have slept as many as 3 children. On either side of the crib is a rope bed. Each had a straw tick and a feather tick. They both have an early matching quilt called log cabin quilts. A single bed or a journeyman's bed is noted on the opposite wall. Often it was for someone who might be traveling to or would just need a place to stay for the night. There's children's nightgowns hanging on the wooden rack on the wall, and in the corner is a quilting rack with more clothes, quilts, and towels. The bed by the front window has a blanket chest, and on top of it is an early bed warmer. It's the only one I've ever seen that has a wooden frame made with square nails dating it into the 1800s. As you slide it out, it was heated to keep the bed sheets warm for the children. Going into the other room is a small table, a yarn winder, a crib, and a really neat chest of drawers made of walnut, mortised throughout the entire chest and through the top. On top of it, you'll see several little leather straps. I love to ask the young girls that we're showing the village to what they think these things were used for. I find very few people that come up with the correct answer. They were actually used to curl the young women's hair. They're called hair curlers. In the corner is a pencil post bed, which is fairly rare. Several years ago, a good picker friend of mine in Asheville, John Wilson, had promised to find me one real cheap, hopefully around $300 to $400. Well, 5 to 6 years later, he finally did find one, and he said these things are worth close to $1,000 today. but I only paid $300 for it, and I've been letting you thinking I was going to find one for the last 5 to 6 years, so I'll sell it to you for what I've got in it. Again, this house is fully furnished for a rather large family, and we're fortunate to have gotten a lot of history and first-hand information from the original family members. Now, as we go to the Deitz kitchen, remember it's unattached. Remember also that the most common place for a fire is in the kitchen. So if the kitchen caught on fire, it wouldn't burn the entire house down if you could put the kitchen out. On the porch, we have an engraved grindstone found underneath the house. It does show the history of the people that lived in it and the date. It's kind of hard to read, but you can make out several names and dates. Also a clothesline and a washboard and a wooden beaded bucket and washstand also on the porch. Inside the kitchen door on the right is a small table, apple peeler, and a handmade cherry pitta. I love to ask children what they think this thing is. Most, again, can't figure it out. Sometimes the adults are able to. Also notice the single seater attached to the table. There's another corner cupboard with salt glazed china. Beside it is a lock and keyed sugar chest. On it you'll see a cone and sugar nippers. Sugar nippers were used to cut small pieces of sugar to be used in cooking. Very interesting fact, sugar chests always were kept locked because sugar was very valuable and hard to come by. The dining room table is called a sawbuck table. It actually resembles sawbucks. It's pegged on top with 2 boards made from walnut. It has matching chairs and a dough bowl. A basket also with realistic looking vegetables and sweet rolls. Beside the fireplace is a beautiful green flower bin, a hanging cupboard, and wooden measuring boxes. A massive fireplace is used for open hearth cooking. It's also used during a festival. On the left side is a pewter cupboard fully filled with early pewter plates, steins, and more cooking items. Another small table is by the window with a couple of early fruit presses on the floor. There's an early wooden keg on the stand used for wines and most any beverage that they would have used. Beside it is a hunt safe. Remember, the hunt safes have long, tall legs. Hunt safes, hunt cupboards, all are described because of the length of the legs. There are a couple of beautiful Catawba Valley pieces of pottery underneath it.